Welcome to the MPFFU podcast. The intent and purpose of the MPFFU podcast is to support the mission to improve wages, working hours, and working conditions for its members. This podcast will disseminate evidence-based relevant information, resources, and strategies. To accomplish this, the MPFFU podcast will provide reliable, factual, and actionable information that strengthens, empowers, and supports the MPFFU members and locals through united action. Now our host, Jeff Lassers.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 7th episode of the MPFFU podcast. I'm Jeff Lassers, and I've been a firefighter paramedic with the West Bloomfield Township Fire Department, Local 1721, since 2004. In this episode, I sit down with Monty Nye, who is a retired firefighter and paramedic from the Meridian Township Fire Department, Local 1600. Currently, Monty is an active retiree with the Grand Ledge Fire Department, Local 2627, as well as the MPFFU 5th District Vice President and our EMS Committee Chair. Monty has been around a while, like a long while. The dude has served to represent Michigan's professional fire service on more union, state, and EMS committees than I have years on the job. He's probably worked on more contracts than there are fireman mustaches in November. Well, maybe not that many, but you get it. You name the fire or EMS committee in Michigan, and he's probably held a position or at least attended the meetings. During this episode, Monty will help us appreciate the value of understanding the role and functions of the MPFFU and its locals. Then he'll describe the role of the MPFFU EMS Committee. We finish off by discussing how members can get informed, educated, and involved with the EMS Committee goals and objectives. This turned out to be a very informative episode that provides a clear and concise overview of what the MPFFU EMS Committee is and what it does. Remember, the MPFFU podcast is new and there's always room to improve, so please email us your feedback and tell us what you think about the show or send us ideas for future episodes to mpffupodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out the Instagram account at m.p.f.f.u. And finally, please subscribe, like, share all the stuff on the Michigan Professional Firefighter Union YouTube channel. Thank you and enjoy the show. Hi, Monty.
Hi.
You ready, buddy?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's go.
How are you this morning?
Doing well, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
My name's Manny Nye. I'm the 5th District Vice President for the MPFFU. Retired out of Meridian Township, Local 1600, and I'm currently with Grand Ledge, Local 2627. I first got into EMS in 1984 as a basic, so we're going back a ways. And then I went to paramedic school in 1990 and got hired on at Meridian Township.
Right on. How many years you do in Meridian?
25.
25. Now you're retired,
years.
eh?
I'm retired.
Well, career
enjoying
one.
it, yeah. Staying connected through the union and my activities there. I chair the MPFFU EMS Committee. With that, I also sit on the EMSCC for the state of Michigan, the EMS Coordination Committee. Been on that. I got back looking the other day, 20 years this year.
Oh, so you've seen all the drama for 2 decades now.
Yeah.
So for people that don't know, and most of the people in the MPFFU probably don't know what that committee is, give them a quick overview of what that committee does. That's a pretty big one.
Committee's made up of 28, I think it is, different stakeholders from around the state of Michigan dealing with EMS. There's private EMS has 3 spots on it. Labor has 3 spots, one of which is guaranteed to the MPFFU, but we fill all 3. You have the IC Society, the fire chiefs, pharmacists, hospitals, anything, all the stakeholders with EMS make up this coordination committee for the state.
So basically anybody who could represent any point at which the EMS or EMS patient would be touched has a say in this.
Yeah, and it continues to grow. Recently, they added law enforcement, nurses in there as well. And there are 6 ex officio members that don't vote, but that are representative. We have somebody from the House of Representatives assigned. The Senate normally has somebody, and a couple other agencies.
So it's basically the top committee of the state EMS that advises to the state EMS office, for lack of a better term. And you're there to assure that the MPFFU members are best represented.
Yes.
Okay, so and your committee, I'm sure, their primary concern is that, because that's the leveraging committee, for lack of a better term, for all things EMS in Michigan. So you need to be well positioned on there to know what's coming down the pike, what changes are coming, what's the next pandemic, all those things, right?
Yeah, and the EMSCC is also made up of many subcommittees, of which I chair the Operations Committee, which is one of the more important committees on the EMSCC. It sets up how your agency is going to be set up and how your vehicles are set up and the equipment that will be on those vehicles as well.
So that's not just coming from an office from 2 or 3 EMS people. That's actually coming from a committee that identifies what does every truck need to have based on license level. What does that agency need to have to be considered ALS, BLS, or MFR?
Yes, exactly. And it gets thoroughly vetted and debated.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a box of Band-Aids, you're going to have discussion on it. Yes.
You're right. How many boxes, how many tourniquets, how many 4x4s, blankets, you get it.
And that changes with technology and with protocols, which is a separate committee. They change. So then we have to annually address and look at our equipment to make sure that you have the equipment to meet the protocols that are there as well.
Yeah, capnography didn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
12 lead EKGs didn't come out of nowhere.
They were all struggles to get them on there, but I think they're all valuable tools to use.
Absolutely. So before we get into more of the EMS stuff, and you and I are, let's call it, we're EMS guys as well. We're firemen first or the MPFFU, but you and I have a long history of doing EMS stuff.
Yeah.
So before we get into more of that, can you tell all of our listeners why should they appreciate, value, and understand the role of the MPFFU and its locals?
I guess the best way is if you're not doing it for the union or for yourself, somebody else is doing it. So you have all these people that are out there representing your rights, protecting you as an employee at the local level. And as you go higher to the state level on a broader picture, looking at the things that you might not even know affect you, like some of the committees that we sit on at the EMSCC. And, not everybody has the opportunity to be involved or can do it, but somebody is out there doing it for them. Just spoke with a local this morning, and we have some PEP training coming up down in Indianapolis. All different tracks on how to better represent our union members. And this local's sending 8 people down there. So these 8 people are giving up their days off to go down there and become further educated in how to best represent and protect our members. So I think that's one of the reasons why they should appreciate. They're out there watching over, like we are doing with the legislation or the different changes to EMS. We have that on the fire side as well. I say if you're not doing it, somebody else is out there doing it on your behalf.
So you might as well get involved or at least knowledgeable what's happening. Because they might be doing a good job.
Exactly. And, I've always told younger members, this union is what you make it.
Yeah.
If you don't like the way something's going, get involved, get out there. Our local got into the IFF. I made contact with President Huffnagel at the time and Secretary Treasurer Chesney and said, whatever you need, give us a call. And they did, because they're always looking for people to fill different spots and get on committees. And it's really opened some neat doors for me along the way and opportunities to meet presidents and vice presidents and different people. And
of the United States or
of the United States.
Oh, not just the locals?
Yeah, during the election time, I do a lot for MDA. One of my roles is a liaison between the MPFFU and muscular dystrophy. So
yeah, I can attest how busy you are. It was hard to schedule you for this.
Yeah, it's what you make it. You want it to be a great union, you have to get involved and make it that.
So let's talk about one of the things that makes our union great is making sure that we're up to speed on everything EMS to protect our business of being firefighters and EMS providers in the many communities of Michigan. So let's start with that specific committee, the MPFFU EMS Committee. What does it do, other than the obvious in the title?
Well, it's made up of 15 members, a good cross-section of every district of the MPFFU. We have agencies that represent that are basic EMT agencies. We have transporting agencies, non-transporting. So we're trying to get a good cross-section of everybody on this committee. And they share what's going on in their areas, as well as those that are on the EMSCC subcommittees share back to these members to take back to their districts and their locals what's going on in a broader picture with the state.
So it really is a funnel.
Yeah, kind of is.
Right.
We use them to help us gather the information we need. So we pass it up to the chain to the president, Matt Sarr, and the executive board so that action can be taken at a higher level to help protect our members as well.
Okay, so really, you and I had some time to talk about this before, and it really boils down to what you're saying is to three things your committee does. Number one, it maintains representation of all MPFFU locals and members at all state committees and legislative issues.
Right.
It also collects, organizes, measures, evaluates, and tracks specific data, information. We always want to know what's going on, so we got our eyes on what's happening around us. And then the third thing is assist locals with maintaining, strengthening, and or upgrading their EMS services to best serve their communities. So let's start with that first one of maintaining representation of all MPFFU locals and members at state committees and legislative issues, which we've really talked about already. But bottom line, why is it important for the MPFFU to participate in these committees and legislative issues?
Because if we're not there representing the MPFFU, it's not going to go our way on certain issues. The members that sit on the committees are kind of like a watchdog group. We're watching over the rights of our members as new legislation or policies and procedures come forward, and want to make sure that we're properly represented there. We have private EMS as a big cross-section of people on the EMSCC as well, and their interests don't always align with ours.
It's interesting you say that. We do have similar interests. We also have different interests. More of our locals represent very specific geographic areas where many of the private agencies really intermingle over many of them and transport all over the place. And bottom line, we need both industries to be healthy.
Absolutely.
Right. And so it's kind of finding that mix, in my opinion, of where's the relationship for a win-win-win, for the patients to have a win, for fire departments to have a win, and for private EMS to have a win. Because if all three are healthy, that stool is going to hold up very well. You take out one of those, this stool doesn't hold up very well.
Lately, with private EMS and with the fire chiefs, again, we don't always line up, but with us and the chiefs is most often we do. But the last year or so, we've worked great together with private EMS in trying to get legislation passed that will hopefully help bring more medics into the field, because that's where we have the shortage right now. It's on the paramedics. And so we've been concentrating on legislation to make it easier without lowering the standards, make it easier to get medics in the field for our locals.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if we don't have EMS providers, we don't have an EMS system.
Exactly.
We're well positioned to do it. Private EMS handles their side. We handle ours. And some communities are best served by private EMS. Some communities are served by both. It is what it is. But we all have to have EMS providers. I agree. Okay, so the committee really makes sure that there's representation always there so that they can always kind of, it isn't always pushing back on something that's new, but maybe educating people that have a new legislative issue. Because a lot of times, in my opinion, the biggest weakness is the unintended consequence that nobody thought of, saw, or wanted to happen, right? So you come up with a new law. Every single EMS rig must have EpiPens. Okay, well, you just cost this one county $80,000 a year in expired EpiPens that they're never going to use, right? So there's always an unintended consequence that's really steeped in something that's positive.
We constantly are going to our legislators, say, look, if you're going to put something out EMS related, come to us. We'll guide you through it.
Right.
There's been legislation out there that they tried pushing through that required specific CPR training for drug overdoses. Well, it's not really different. There was one that required AEDs on all licensed EMS rigs. You don't need an AED along with your monitor defibrillator.
Right.
So it's just a matter of going out and educating the legislators as well.
Yeah, sometimes they don't understand what the problem is to be fixed. And again, these people have great intentions. They want people to be saved. They want people to live longer, healthier lives. But sometimes these ideas need a professional that does the things to remind them. And I can imagine it's not just the MPFFU representatives looking at these legislators. It's all the other people in those EMSCC committees like, yo, I'm a doctor in an ED. That's not a good idea.
The EMSCC, we might not all agree, but we're all friends at the end of the day. We get along. And we didn't used to have to really come together or debate legislation as much. When I first got on MSCC 20 years ago, I think the first piece of legislation that came out was maybe the EpiPen thing. That was huge back then. That was, I think, the only piece of legislation relating to EMS that year. Now we meet monthly and we might have 4 or 5 new pieces coming out. There's over 30 that are active right now that we're monitoring and speaking on behalf of or opposing.
Right. Because every piece of legislation represents change. Every change represents a change in my work environment or what I might be able to do and when I can do it. I mean, the cascade of things that need to be really thought of after anything is even brought to the table is crazy, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's an easy one to understand. Got to have people at the table representing our interests. The second thing your committee does is collect, organize, measure, evaluate, and track specific data. Why do you collect this data? What do you do with it? What is the data?
I'm sure we've all heard the saying that information is knowledge, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
But that knowledge can only become power if you have a way or the ability to do so. And we have that with our president, Matt Saar. When he goes out and speaks to legislators in the governor's office as well, he has to have accurate data. He can't say, well, we're short paramedics. Well, how many? Last count was over 300, and we're trying to get an actual accurate number right now. We're working on that data. He needs to be able to say specifically, we cover a certain percentage of the population of Michigan. We have this many open paramedic spots. We have the EMS committee working even between our regular scheduled meetings, collecting that data. We initially start out with like a survey monkey.
I was going to say, if you just start off with a monkey, I think I'm already interested more in this.
Yeah.
But a survey monkey, it's okay, I get it.
Survey monkey we use, and normally you only get back at really about 30% of people responding back. But we got, I think, over 60 initially. And then we take those that don't respond, we divide it up amongst our cross-section of people that are on the EMS committee, and they start reaching out, calling, getting that data. Then we're down to probably just 4 or 5 that we don't have the data on. And what we're looking at this time when we're updating it is any new EMS agencies. So we've had some that have gone into EMS since we last updated. We'd like to know how many spots that you have budgeted paramedic spots, and then how many of those spots are currently open.
It sounds like a census.
Yeah, it kind of is. And I think we're just over 300 open paramedic spots right now. The data, we still have a few more to add to it, and we compile it all, give that information to President Saar. There's nothing worse than going out there and being contradicted because your numbers weren't accurate. So we've been giving him updates on where we're at through the process that he can use, and now we're going to have some good hard numbers for the next several years.
So it sounds like this is a specific set of data that you decided to collect during this time period, and it always changes. Like it might be similar what you collect, but you focus on more specific things based on the times.
One of the last things that we did prior to all the openings that we have was trying to get the expansion of fire-based EMS. So we would use the data that we had of the coverage we currently have, where we could move forward and have additional EMS coverage, and then present that to legislators as well.
But it's specific and measurable, and that's what's important. You can't just walk into a legislative meeting and be like, I feel like we need better tools.
Right.
I feel like we don't have enough people.
And they're going to ask you why.
Right.
And
that's
then
the
you
first
gotta
question.
have the data to explain.
And these aren't EMS people, right? These are just people.
Right.
So, and they got to worry about the garbage. They got to worry about police. They got to worry about, schools. They can't just worry about fire EMS. So we're there to educate them. Sir and or ma'am, this is what needs to change, and here's the information of why and what the cost is long term. It's cheaper if we do something now.
We'll speak to him, and President Saar will speak to him, and we'll have that data also on a handout for him to leave it with him.
Right.
So that it's easy to forget a conversation when you have to have, 20.
I'm sure a politician likes to make you feel like they're going to look at it too.
Right. Right. They usually hand it right off to staff.
Yeah. Some person without even looking at them.
Many times it's easier just to talk to staff.
Right.
They're the ones that are going to be in
they're making the agendas a lot of times, right?
Right.
Okay, so we collect that data, keep an eyes on what's going on in the landscape. So far we've covered maintaining representation, and then while we're there, we're quoting correct, measurable, specific data to back up our claims for our representation, or to be able to answer questions that we found at that meeting. All right, so the last thing you do is you assist locals with maintaining, strengthening, and or upgrading EMS services. Now, before let's say the lack of EMS providers to fill these services, the big initiative you said was expanding fire-based EMS. Right. Talk more about how your committee supports and helps us upgrade our services as fire-based EMS.
One of the things that we do is to, again, provide information, whether it's through the IFF's white paper on fire-based EMS or give them the data that we have showing where we already cover and agencies that have gone into EMS. Recently, we've had several that private EMS just can't cover anymore. And so they're almost forced into going into EMS. And there are different ways and different legislative bills that are out there. The Bennett bill, for one, will allow you to incrementally increase your staffing until you can have full ALS 24 hours a day
Right. It's basically a way to say you don't have to just turn a switch from not ALS 24/7 to 24/7. That's kind of a hard ask in a community that's just becoming ALS. So in those situations, the Bennett bill, for those of you who don't know, is a nice way to migrate in that direction. But once you start, you can't stop.
Right. And it does allow you a couple renewal periods to try to get up there and get a full-fledged 24/7 ALS transport system. So we assist them with educating them on things of that nature. We have gone in before and done EMS presentations before city councils, township boards, and things of that nature as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you got to make sure that people understand what an EMS system is. And it's really a very loose term because EMS in Marquette is different from EMS in Livonia. Different people, different circumstances. And then you got to make sure they understand what their options are and what system they already have. So let's say you're a township or a city with a BLS fire department and you got to call ALS and you don't even know what that means. You should probably evaluate your system to see, do you have the most optimized system for your people? And what we find most often, I think especially in Southeast Michigan, is that our highly populated areas with full-time fire departments get the swiftest response times with very good paramedics on scene that are well-staffed and well-equipped.
Our stations are many times in the neighborhoods where their calls are going to be coming from. We're not out doing hospital-to-hospital transfers.
Right.
And or long distance transfers. And
well, we hope not. Sometimes we do.
Have to wait. Right. Anymore, it's, waiting at the ER, even at the local ER to drop off the patient can be an issue. Our response times are generally always better than private EMS.
All right, Monty, 20 years working on EMS committees in the state of Michigan, representing the MPFFU. You've seen a lot. Especially the last couple of years, you've probably been the busiest you've ever been talking about EMS and just from a legislative point of view. With that experience and this being a very busy time, what do you see coming down the pike that our MPFFU members and locals need to be aware of when it comes to EMS in our communities in Michigan?
For the foreseeable future, it's doing more with less. I mean, staffing numbers aren't going up like we want them to. Our members are getting beat up. Many departments where they're not getting a lot of breaks between calls and running 24/7. I think coming down the road, the pandemic issue, that's not going to go away. We're going to keep seeing resurgence in that. Everything that I've seen shows that there's one wave after another going to be coming for a while. I think what's coming down the pipe is EMS is going to end up being restructured and almost unrecognizable to what it is now. If we can't get a way to get more medics out in the field for our membership, some fire department-based programs for training, there's going to be a reduction in either services that we provide or how we provide it. There's already been a big push to decrease the licensure level that's required for transporting ambulances. There was one department that had MFRs that were able to drive. I think possibly we're going to see more of like an Israeli model, providing EMS, one or two advanced rigs, and a lot more basic rigs.
Yeah.
And that all impacts us. If we can't get the medics there for our departments, then you're going to see a reduction of the medics, which means more work for the medics that are there. It's going to be contractual issues, and we're already seeing this where departments are hiring basics, where they used to hire just medics. So I think you're going to see a restructuring of how we deliver our service model coming up.
Yeah, and you didn't even touch on the fact of the human element of we can only last so long and so many calls.
Yeah, and we have people that are leaving great departments with great benefits because their stations aren't staffed like they should. It's a busy department. They're running 4 ambulances when they probably ought to be running 8 or 10. And so these crews are just getting beat up, one call after another, with zero downtime except for their days off, and that's a recovery day.
Yeah, and you're going to go home, you got 2 kids in your recovery day like you're a zombie. Yeah, you're at home, but you're not there. You're tired.
Exactly.
You talk to some of these people that are working in very busy communities, running crazy amounts of calls. A good night was they got 2 or 3 hours of sleep. because they actually got to fall asleep.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not good for 25, 30 years. When you're doing runs of it, fine. You got runs of it here and there, but the human body can't take that for that long. And you can't expect it to sustain it for another 20 years.
Right, exactly. Nobody gets out of this business unscathed. And we are doing everything at the MPFFU to try to get more staffing in the stations. We have legislation that we recommended and came to fruition through Representative Yarrick for a Michigan-only option of a license. We call it Michigan-only. It's truly not Michigan-only. But it would allow the state to develop their own test, meeting the same requirements that the current paramedics have. And that was a big misinformation thing was out there. We're not decreasing any requirements. Whether or not the National Registry and COAMPS accreditation has led to the issue of fewer medics, we're not even arguing that anymore, but we do know that it stands in the way of us getting more paramedics out there. And there's been plenty of great paramedics that have gone through department-based programs. And we think that if we can do that, we can get more medics out there. And that's just one of our ideas. And, you know, we tell the opposers, the people that are opposing legislation, it's fine, but then tell me your idea. Nobody else is coming up with any ideas. You know,
people seem to want an outcome.
Yeah.
They tell you that's the idea.
Well, we'll decrease CEs. People aren't leaving this business because of CEs.
Yeah, training's not bad if you do it right. Training's supposed to be fun. It should be educational, and you should learn from it in a good way. If your employees are having a problem with training and it's a CE issue, you don't know what you're looking at.
So, you know, that's one of the things that we're pushing, and we think that might help get people back in the stations. That, and obviously, we're advocating for the benefits, the pay increases to properly compensate our members. Because right now, if we don't, we're just going to create a round-robin effect where people are going to leave one department to go to another for the better benefits. So we're trying to raise benefits for everybody and keep our people as happy as we can and get them the relief that they need.
And hopefully some of these communities recognize maybe the new standard that they need to provide for our members. Rising tide, raising all ships. I think it's going to create a more steady EMS provider and firefighter employee amongst our communities in Michigan.
I think they're starting to see that.
Yeah.
They're starting to see that. And I think that the pandemic really brought a lot of that to light.
I think the hospitals and nursing have taught the fire departments a lot about wages and the value of humans going to where they're going to be compensated appropriately.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so as we close out, let's switch to how our members can get informed, educated, and prepared directly with either just the MPFFU or the MPFFU EMS Committee and its functions. What are your recommendations, Monty?
Well, first of all, start with your local, whether it's running for office at the local level or just going to the local president and say, look, I saw this training here. I'd like to go and get involved. And that can transition you up to the MPFFU level. You know, you start getting more involved. Whether it's on one of our committees, the PEP training in Indianapolis help teach you better ways to serve and protect your members and then bring that back to your local as well. And right on up to the IFF and IFF committees as well. IFF puts on many programs, as we do at the state, that are open to the whole membership. And all that stuff funnels back down to, if you're doing it correctly, back down to your members at the local level. And again, get involved. This union is what you make of it. We have a lot of great people making it a great organization, but we need fresh blood all the time to get people to come in and even bring new perspectives and help us continue to make it a great place.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
That is all for the show today, everybody. Thank you to Monty Nye for joining me on the 7th episode of the MPFFU podcast. This turned out to be a very informative episode that provides a clear and concise overview of what the MPFFU EMS Committee is and what it does. I hope all of our listeners enjoyed the show and learned something. Remember, this is a new show and there's always room to improve, so please email us your feedback and tell us what you think about the show or send ideas for future episodes to mpffupodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out the Instagram account at m.p.f.f.u. And subscribe, like, share, all the stuff on the Michigan Professional Firefighter Union YouTube channel. There's all sorts of good stuff on there. Come on, get on it. Let's get noticed on that algorithm thing. AI's coming. Let's go. Like it. Have a great day.